It's the Spiwe Show, an idea exchange empowering you to live well, live fully, and love deeply. And now, here's our host, Spiwe Pierce.
This is FM 89.9 KMOJ. We are the People's Station. And today, my guest on the program is Spiwe Pierce. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you this morning, Charles?
It's great to have you in the program. I know we have a lot to talk about. We've talked about being on for so long, you being my guest, and finally it's happened, right?
Yes, it finally happened.
And one of the reasons why I actually Spiwe was on my program this morning because you have an online show, right?
Yes, I do.
Show. Okay, tell us a little bit about it.
It is called The Spiwe Show, and the objective is to serve as an idea exchange, empowering people to live well, live fully, and love deeply by improving the quality of our personal, professional, and spiritual relationships.
Wow. Okay, but let's talk about. Because I'm from Africa.
Yes.
Let's talk about homeland for a little bit. You are from the country of the beautiful Victoria Falls.
Yes, I am. I'm from Zimbabwe, born and raised.
The home of the great Robert Mugabe.
Well, some people think he's great.
I know. But you know, I was telling you before the show, quite interestingly, I grew up hearing the name Robert Mugabe. I've got a 13-year-old. He's still hearing Robert Mugabe.
Yes, he is. Let's see. He has been, our president has been in power since 1980.
Wow.
And I remember him saying that he was not going to leave until God himself took him out of power. So we are waiting.
Okay, and I'm sure Native would think it's time for that. You know, we have a little changing at the top, right?
Well, sure.
It's been long enough.
Originally, we had elections every 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then they were pushed to every 6 years. And if you listen to the third parties who have come in to observe the fairness of the elections, they would tell you that there have been elections that he lost, and still he's in power.
So, coming to the United States from Zimbabwe, how was it like? What did you find the most surprising element when you got here?
You know, when I came here, I was 17.
17.
And I came for college. And I went to a small liberal arts school called Defiance College in Defiance, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And probably the first thing I found really surprising, because I'm from Harare, and Harare is the capital city of Zimbabwe, so it's a large city. If you go downtown, it probably looks, the skyline looks a little bit like downtown Minneapolis. So I get to Defiance College, and it's a small town. And I looked up the street, and there was an Ames, and J.C. Penney, I think, might have been there then, and there was a Pizza Hut. And I looked down the other side, and downtown Defiance had a couple of traffic lights. And I was not expecting a city in the United States to be so small.
Mm-hmm.
And there wasn't a lot to do in Defiance. It was very safe, very nice people. And it was the place that my parents thought would be a good place for me to get acclimated into a new culture and a new country. And they were right. At age 17, I was very naive. But as for me, I'm like, where's the party at? And there was no party to be had. So that was disappointing.
What did you like the most within you know the few weeks or few months of being here?
Oh, the freedom.
The freedom.
The freedom. Because, you know, being really away from home for the first time in a long time. I was in boarding school when I was I think I was about 9. And I was in boarding school in high school, but being 10,800 miles away from home, I was free. And so I would go out with my friends, and I'd think, oh, I have to be home. Wait a minute, I don't have to be home. And or I'd think, well, I want to go out on Saturday night. Maybe I should call my dad. Oh, wait a minute, I don't need permission. That was nice. I think I enjoyed that freedom for about the first year before I was ever homesick.
A couple of weeks ago, I had a guest on my program, and we talked about African parents being so protective of their young ones here in the United States. And to the parents' defense, one of them said, we don't want our kids to lose their culture.
Yes.
Was there any concern of your parents having you to be here by yourself why they were back home, that you would lose your culture?
No, they were not concerned, but I think it was because both of them had been educated here. So my dad started at Defiance College, and then he transferred to Columbia. And so he graduated from Columbia. My mother came, and she was at, I think it was Westchester State College. And so they had lived here for, I think they lived here for at least 13 years before they went back home. And so they knew what it was like here, and they knew the temptations and the evils that could befall, you know, a young person in the United States, which is part of the reason why I ended up in Defiance. And we didn't talk a lot about that. And I like to think it was also because they raised me in such a way that by the time I was 17, I was who I was going to be. And I don't think they had a lot of concern about me losing my culture at that point.
Now, so is there a large Zimbabwean population in Minnesota?
No. There is, I have met a few Zimbabweans, but not many. And I've met more, there's a larger, in fact, there's a larger Liberian population, and there's a larger Nigerian population, and I think our largest African population is of Somalis, because Minnesota was one of the places that opened its doors to the Somali refugees. But Zimbabweans I have not found very many.
In case anyone's wondering why is she on this program, I just have to say that I'm very impressed with your performance in America so far. You know, you were, I think, 2009 Super Lawyer, one of the best lawyers in Minnesota.
Thank you.
You know, yes. I was reading a little bit about you, and it was very impressive. I mean, you know, we come here, most of us from Africa, and our agenda changes once we get here. Our agenda goes the other way, and we try to live day by day.
Yes. And
then we let the wind depict our direction versus come in and keep steady and say, this is why I came here.
Well, you know, my father has, well, he's late now, but my father was very, very strong on education and professionalism. So he had, by the time he left Columbia, he had 4 degrees. And I think he had 2 bachelor's, a master's, and a PhD. And one of my goals was to be the first female Dr. Moyana in our family, because my dad was a PhD, my uncle, who was the governor of the Reserve Bank at one point, was a PhD, his brother was a PhD, and so I'm surrounded by men who really valued education and worked very hard. So I grew up watching my father and my mother, and they worked very hard. So that's just what I knew. So when I got here, it was just a given that that's what I was going to do. I was going to get an education. I was going to work hard for the rest of my life, because that's what Moyanas did. And so this is the result of all of that work. And actually the Super Lawyers, I was a Minnesota Rising Star, which is the designation for lawyers. I think it's lawyers under 40. I was under 40 at the time.
I thought you were under 20 at the time. Now you're under 25, huh?
Oh no, I'm over 40 now.
But again, that's impressive, especially given the minority population in Minnesota. Okay,
Yes.
You know, it's predominantly what it is, and for you to achieve such a status, I was very impressed. Your blog show that you have, the Spiwe show.
Yes.
And what are some of the topics you talk about? I know now you're talking about this, live well.
Live well, live fully, and love deeply. So the idea is, how do we as human beings live better? How do we live in a way that, my personal mantra is, live a life of no regret. And if I had to die today, because you never know the day,
Right.
would I say, if God came for me right now, would I say, wait a minute, I'm not ready. I haven't told my children I love them. I haven't treated people with respect. How do you live a life of no regret? And that's really the goal of the show. Everybody has experiences. And if we get together and we talk about and exchange those experiences, we can add to each other ideas that will help us do that. So some of the topics, we do spiritual, we do professional, we do personal, And so on the personal side, we talk about good things, we talk about bad things, we talk about fun things. So we talk about things like red flags. How do you know when you are in a relationship that you ought to leave or you ought to be leery of? We talk about things like divorce. Is it a cultural epidemic? You notice that in the United States, for example, there's some numbers that would say the divorce rate is 50% of all marriages.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at Japan and India, they're single-digit divorce rates. So is there something about culture that plays into the divorce rate? We talk about on the professional side, what are the secrets of success? I had a speaker who is Keith White, who happens to be the president of, how do you talk to God? How do you meditate? Why should you go to church? In this environment, why does that matter anymore? And really the topics just depend on what's going on in the world at large and what I have seen people struggle with and what I've struggled, questions and issues that I've struggled with myself.
So you keep mentioning the pronoun we. So that tells me that do you invite people on your show to be guests who are authorities in those areas who can shed light, on the topic? How does it work, or do you, ditch out all of the advice?
Oh no, I give no advice.
Okay.
I give no advice.
So what's the format of your show then?
The format is I usually have guests.
Okay.
And my guests can be, I have an Amazon best-selling author, Barbara Hofmeister, who calls in from Germany once a month.
Mm-hmm.
And her focus is on helping people achieve their dreams and their goals. How do you get from the place where, you're sort of living life day by day without objective, without goal, to a point where you're living the life of your dreams? I have different speakers who come in. I've had pastors, I have had CEOs, I've had presidents of organizations, founders, and I've also had everyday people who come and they just talk about their experiences. So normally I like guests. I've had people who have called in and provided their input. One of the things that I stress is everyday people, everyday lives. You don't have to be a celebrity to be on the show, because all of us have lived and all of us have a story to tell and all of us have experiences that we can share. So I've had, authors to everyday people.
What really got you this?
God.
Blogging and talking about issues in the community.
I have always known that there was a purpose that I was supposed to fulfill.
Other than being a lawyer?
Other than being, yes, other than being a lawyer, I knew there was something that I was supposed to contribute. And for years, I wasn't sure what it was, but I figured, if I kept to my meditation, kept my ear to the ground, that sooner or later, my father would let me know what that was. And one day it just happened, and I was talking to a friend of mine, and he said, you really ought to start a conversation because you have very unique viewpoints, and you read, I read my Bible all the time. I call it my life manual. And you have a very different take. Mm-hmm. And I said, I'm not preaching, I'm not a minister, I'm not interested in anything like that. And he said, well, why don't you do an audio blog? And I said, well, what is that? And he shared that with me, and I thought, ooh, that's a good idea. And I just, in my soul, in my spirit, I just knew that this is something that I was supposed to do.
Do you think your educational background at all helped you prepare for this blog right now that you're doing?
I think all of my life experiences did, because in my educational background, I've been practicing law this is my 19th year.
And you look 19 years old. How is that possible?
Thank you. I was so young when I started.
That's the secret.
That was a whole nother issue, because it's hard to get clients when you look 16.
Yes.
But I did divorce and family law and juvenile and criminal work for the first 5 years of my career. And I've seen a lot of things. Oh yes, I've seen a lot of things. I've seen a lot of problems. I've seen a lot of pain. I've seen a lot of issues. I've seen a lot of triumphs. So all of that has helped. And in my own personal experience, I've got 2 beautiful children, And I'm divorced, so I know what it's like to be happy and single. I know what it's like to be happy and married. I know what it's like to be unhappy and all of those spectrums.
Do you know what it's like to be an educated black woman?
Thank you for joining us on the Spiwe Show. Until next time, live well, live fully, and love deeply.